Oh, golly. Good.
Mystery Men wasn't just a superhero movie. It was comic book rebellion. A film that gave us fork-flinging heroes and rage-powered warriors, while Marvel was still figuring out leather costumes. But behind the thrift store uniforms and suburban heroics, nothing was easy. The script mocked everything audiences loved. The cast included Oscar winners playing idiots. And the movie that predicted superhero saturation bombed harder than Captain Amazing's ego. These are 20 weird S about Mystery Men. 1. The comic book nobody read. Mystery Men started as an obscure comic called Flaming Carrot Comics that most people had never heard of. Creator Bob Burden's underground comic featured bizarre heroes with ridiculous powers, published by small indie companies that barely kept the lights on. The Flaming Carrot character wore a giant carrot head and spouted nonsensical dialogue while fighting crime with surreal logic. Hollywood producer Lawrence Gordon discovered the comic in a bargain bin and saw potential for a big-budget superhero parody. The comic's cult following was so small that most moviegoers had no idea they were watching an adaptation. 2. William H. Macy's fork-flinging method. William H. Macy didn't just play the Blue Raja. He became a legitimate silverware-throwing expert through months of intensive training. Macy worked with professional knife-throwing instructors to develop authentic fork-hurling techniques that would look convincing on camera. The Oscar-nominated actor approached the ridiculous role with complete seriousness, treating fork-throwing like legitimate martial arts training. Macy practiced for hours daily, developing the muscle memory and precision required to hit targets consistently during filming. His commitment to the absurd skill impressed cast and crew, who watched a respected dramatic actor master one of cinema's most ridiculous superpowers. 3. Ben Stiller's rage-powered research. Ben Stiller's Mr. Furious wasn't just angry. He was scientifically researched fury based on real psychological studies of rage and aggression. Stiller consulted with psychologists and anger management specialists to understand how genuine rage affects physical performance and mental clarity. The character's power was intentionally vague because real anger doesn't actually grant superhuman abilities, making Mr. Furious the most realistic superhero in the movie. Stiller studied method acting techniques for accessing and controlling emotional states, learning to generate convincing anger without losing professional control during filming. 4. Hank Azaria's disco transformation. Hank Azaria's Blue Raja costume wasn't just silly. It was high fashion designed by real costume professionals who treated the ridiculous outfit with complete seriousness. The turban, vest, and formal wear combination required extensive fittings and custom tailoring to achieve the character's distinctive look. Azaria had to learn proper turban wrapping techniques and practice the character's affected British accent, which wasn't in the original script. The costume design team researched actual Indian formal wear and British colonial fashion to create an authentic foundation for the character's pretentious persona. Azaria's commitment to the accent and mannerisms transformed a simple sight gag into a fully realized character with specific cultural references and personality quirks. 5. Jeffrey Rush's Villain Laboratory. Jeffrey Rush approached Casanova Frankenstein like he was playing Hamlet, bringing Shakespearean intensity to a role that could have been pure cartoon villainy. The Oscar-winning actor researched classic movie villains and operatic performances to create a character who felt genuinely threatening despite the comedy surrounding him. Rush insisted on elaborate costumes and makeup that would make Casanova feel like a real supervillain rather than just a parody. His performance included subtle psychological details that suggested genuine menace beneath the theatrical presentation, making audiences simultaneously laugh at and fear the character. Rush's classical training helped him find the dramatic truth in ridiculous dialogue, delivering absurd lines with conviction that made them seem almost reasonable. The superhero costume thrift store. The Mystery Men costumes weren't designed by Hollywood professionals. They were assembled from thrift store finds and everyday clothing to emphasize the character's amateur status. Costume designer Marilyn Vance deliberately avoided traditional superhero aesthetics, choosing materials and styles that looked homemade rather than professionally crafted. Each character's outfit reflected their personality and economic status. The Shoveler's work clothes, Mr. Furious's leather jacket, the Blue Raja's formal wear. The costume approach required extensive shopping in actual thrift stores and vintage clothing shops to find pieces that looked authentic rather than costume-like. The designers had to balance comedy with functionality, ensuring that actors could perform action sequences while wearing deliberately awkward and impractical outfits. 7. The Invisible Boy's Paradox. Kel Mitchell's Invisible Boy presented a unique acting challenge, playing a character whose power only works when nobody's looking, including the audience. The role required Mitchell to convey confidence and heroism while his character remained completely visible throughout most of the movie. Mitchell had to develop physical comedy techniques that suggested invisibility without actually disappearing, creating humor through the gap between the character's beliefs and reality. The actor worked with the directors to find moments where the Invisible Boy's power might actually work, creating ambiguous scenes that left audiences uncertain about his abilities. Mitchell's performance balanced genuine heroism with self-delusion, making the character sympathetic rather than simply pathetic. 8. Paul Rubins' spleen gas method. Paul Rubins' spleen wasn't just gross. He was scientifically accurate flatulence based on real digestive research and professional gas effects. Rubins worked with special effects teams to create realistic sound effects and visual elements that would make his character's power feel authentic rather than cartoonish. The actor studied the science of human digestion and gas production to understand how his character's ability might actually work within biological parameters. Rubins' performance included subtle physical details that suggested genuine digestive discomfort rather than just comic relief, making the spleen sympathetic despite his disgusting power. 9. The Captain Amazing corporate satire. Greg Kinnear's Captain Amazing wasn't just a superhero, he was a corporate spokesperson whose costume featured more product placements than actual heroic symbols. The character's uniform included logos from multiple fictional sponsors, reflecting real concerns about commercialization in professional sports and entertainment. Kinnear played Captain Amazing as a celebrity athlete rather than a traditional hero, emphasizing media management and public relations over genuine heroism. The performance satirized the emerging trend of superhero movies becoming marketing vehicles for toy sales and merchandising opportunities. Kinnear's portrayal included subtle suggestions that Captain Amazing cared more about his image than actually helping people, making him both admirable and shallow. 10. The Disco Boys musical Mayhem. The Disco Boys weren't just villains, they were a fully functional musical group whose performances required extensive choreography and actual musical training. The actors playing the Disco Boys had to learn synchronized dance routines, musical performance techniques, and character work that made them feel like real entertainers turned evil. The musical sequences required professional choreographers and music directors to create authentic disco performances that would feel genuine rather than parodic. Each disco boy had individual character traits and musical specialties that required specific performance skills and personality development. The musical villain concept allowed the movie to explore themes about entertainment industry corruption and the dark side of celebrity culture. 11. The Herkimer battle weapon. The movie's climactic weapon wasn't just a prop. It was a fully functional mechanical device that required engineering expertise and safety protocols during filming. The Herkimer device's design combined steampunk aesthetics with practical functionality, creating a machine that looked both antique and futuristic. Special effects teams had to ensure that the device could safely produce the visual effects required for climactic battle sequences without endangering performers. The weapon's operation required careful choreography and timing to coordinate mechanical effects with actor performances and camera work. The Herkimer design reflected the movie's theme about ordinary people using unconventional methods to achieve heroic goals. 12. The Champion City location. Hunt. Champion City wasn't just a movie set. It was a carefully constructed urban environment that combined multiple real locations with elaborate set construction. The production team scouted dozens of cities to find locations that could represent a generic American metropolitan area without being recognizable as specific places. The city design required extensive coordination between location managers, set decorators, and visual effects teams to create a cohesive urban environment. Champion City's architecture and atmosphere had to feel both realistic and slightly exaggerated to match the movie's comic book tone. The location work included practical set construction for key scenes that couldn't be achieved through existing urban environments. 13. The Audition Superhero Tryouts. The casting process included actual superhero auditions where actors had to demonstrate their characters' ridiculous powers and convince directors they could make absurd abilities seem believable. Each actor auditioned not just for dialogue delivery, but for physical comedy skills and the ability to commit completely to ridiculous character concepts. The casting directors looked for performers who could balance comedy with genuine heroism, avoiding actors who would play the material purely for laughs. Many established comedians auditioned but were rejected because they couldn't find the emotional truth in their characters' heroic aspirations. The audition process included improvisation exercises where actors had to create backstories and motivations for their ridiculous superpowers. 14. The Special Effects Underground. Mystery Men's special effects weren't just low budget, they were deliberately designed to look homemade and amateur to match the character's DIY superhero status. The effects team avoided sophisticated CGI in favor of practical effects and simple visual tricks that emphasize creativity over technical sophistication. The Invisible Boy's invisibility effects used traditional optical techniques rather than digital effects to maintain the movie's analog aesthetic. The Spleen's gas effects combined practical smoke machines with careful camera work to create disgusting but safe visual gags. The movie's action sequences emphasize practical stunts and real physical comedy over digital enhancement and impossible superhero feats. 15. The Dark Knight Prediction. Mystery. Men predicted the superhero movie boom and subsequent market saturation that wouldn't become obvious until a decade later. The movie's premise that superheroes had become corporate commodities and media celebrities anticipated real concerns about superhero franchise filmmaking. The film's satire of superhero team dynamics predicted later criticism of ensemble superhero movies that prioritize spectacle over character development. Mystery Men's emphasis on working-class heroes suggested that audiences might eventually tire of billionaire superheroes and cosmic threats. The movie's corporate superhero concept anticipated real debates about product placement and merchandising in superhero films. The film's failure at the box office suggested that audiences weren't ready for superhero satire until they had more superhero movies to satirize. 16. The William H. Macy Silverware Training. William H. Macy's preparation for the Blue Raja went beyond fork throwing to include extensive research into Indian culture and British colonial history. Macy worked with cultural consultants to ensure that his character's affectations were based on authentic cultural references rather than simple stereotypes. The actor studied Victorian etiquette and formal dining customs to develop the Blue Raja's precise mannerisms and speech patterns. Macy's costume fittings included learning proper turban construction and traditional Indian formal wear protocols. 17. The Superhero Team Dysfunction, The Mystery. Men's team dynamics weren't just comedic, they were based on real group psychology research about how amateur teams function under pressure. The script incorporated genuine insights about leadership conflicts, ego clashes, and communication problems that affect real volunteer organizations. Each character's personality flaws were designed to create specific group dynamic problems that would feel authentic rather than purely comedic. The team's conflicts reflected real issues that affect workplace teams, community organizations, and amateur sports groups. 18. The Box Office Superhero Timing. Mystery Men's commercial failure reflected audience expectations in 1999. When superhero movies were considered risky rather than guaranteed blockbusters. The movie opened against more traditional summer blockbusters that offered straightforward action rather than genre satire. audiences weren't yet saturated with superhero content, making the movie's parody elements less relevant and accessible than they would become later. The film's marketing struggled to explain the concept to audiences who had limited recent superhero movie experience for reference. 19. The practical superhero effects. The movie's action sequences emphasize practical stunts and physical comedy over digital effects to maintain the amateur superhero aesthetic. Stunt coordinators designed fight scenes that looked realistic for characters with limited training and unconventional fighting styles. The shoveler's construction worker combat style required developing authentic blue-collar fighting techniques rather than martial arts choreography. Mr. Furious's rage-powered combat used real anger management and physical therapy techniques to create believable berserker fighting. The Mystery Men's group combat emphasized teamwork and improvisation rather than individual superhero showcase moments. 20. The superhero satire legacy mystery. Men's influence on later superhero. Satire became apparent as the genre expanded and audiences became more sophisticated about comic book conventions. The movie's approach to deconstructing superhero tropes influenced later films and television shows that examined the psychological and social implications of superheroism. Mystery Men's emphasis on working-class heroes anticipated later superhero content that focused on ordinary people rather than billionaires and gods. The film's corporate superhero satire became more relevant as real superhero movies increasingly emphasized merchandising and franchise building. Mystery Men wasn't just a superhero parody, it was a crystal ball that predicted comic book movie madness 20 years early. Hit that subscribe button for more cult classic secrets and tell us, what's your useless superpower? Thanks for watching, and remember, we've got a blind date with Destiny and it looks like she's ordered the lobster.